Namaste, and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity. I normally will answer a question from a jar during these videos, but today I'm just going to respond a little bit more to an answer I gave recently to a question that said, I have done something so embarrassing and publicly shaming when under the influence. How do I live with it? So in response to that question, I like to, which I didn't do the last time, I like just to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the difference between guilt and shame. I want to talk a little bit about social sanctioning and comparison to judgment. So let's just look at that a little bit further. So the person tells us that she or he or they were under the influence and they've done something that was terribly embarrassing and publicly shaming. So in other words, they were very obvious in doing something that normally they probably would not have done, but they're quite sure that it breached a certain level of social expectation and certain level of social normalcy. So they're feeling very, very bad about it and they don't know how to live with it. We all know what shame is like, right? Shame starts with a spiral within us. It's a little bit of cringing with something embarrassing when we did, but within a few minutes of that cringing, there comes this whole spiral effect. The emotion gets whirling around inside us because it's trying to push past us samskara. But anyway, it's whirling around inside us. It's causing so much physiological symptoms. The gut is tight. You find your iliopsoas, which is that muscle that connects the abdomen to the thighs, starts to contract. So you're pulling forward, almost as if you're trying to protect your vital organs because you feel so vulnerable. You feel so at the mercy of the predator that the body responds this way in fight or flight or freeze. And your face, just the blood just rushes to your face. If you're a blusher, shame is something that you try to avoid because it becomes so obvious on the face. And I'm a blusher, so I often blush when I'm feeling shame or embarrassment. So that is the spiral, and the spiral will continue because the thoughts take over. So we have the emotional reaction, the physiological reaction, and the mind just carries away with the story. It starts, oh my God, how can you have done that? Oh my God, how am I going to live with that? What am I going to do next? I can never show my face in public again. I can't believe I did that. What will they think? Oh my God, I can't believe it. It's so bad. And we really get into that shame spiral. So a tiny little bit of embarrassment can lead to this whole shame cycle. And that shame cycle is actually just an activation of old energy that's already within us, right? If you know what a samskara is in yoga, it's just we've had an experience in the past. Something happened. Life unfolded in front of us with this certain thing. Maybe our body responded it. We tripped and fell flat on our face going up to get our diplomas, for example, and somebody videotaped it and put it on YouTube or something. Regardless of what it is, something happened. And we could not cope with that situation because it caused a certain degree of discomfort inside us. We didn't want to be consciously aware of it, so we take these invisible hands within us, some would call it willpower, and we push it down away from our conscious awareness. We think we're pushing it away by avoiding and numbing and suppressing and repressing and denying that it happened, but what we're actually doing is pushing it down inside. And it gets stuck in us emotionally. It gets stuck in our subconscious mind, the memory of it. It's not that we can pull what happened into us. The reality of it is it happened. It just is. But there was an emotional energy that we couldn't really cope with at the time, and that's what we pull in and we stuff and we store as a samskara. We've had a very embarrassing situation. The thoughts came into our mind. We may have had a core belief originating or a core belief being intensified. Maybe we're hearing this messaging, oh, you're so stupid. How could you do that? You're so awkward. Nobody does things like you do. You're wrong. You shouldn't be here. And the feeling just gets stuffed down as well. But it's a messaging, a core belief that stays in the subconscious and it's constantly being activated. And when that core belief gets activated, the shame cycle starts again, and we have that physiological, emotional experience of being embarrassed and shame. The difference between embarrassment and shame is that embarrassment is shame, but it's a milder version of it. So we may use the word embarrassment for tripping and falling in the cafeteria, or almost falling in the cafeteria, or dropping something in front of somebody, or saying something that doesn't come out right, or getting up to do a speech and forgetting our words, or something like that. And shame, the shame experience and the full cycle, but that embarrassment could be enough to activate the full shame cycle, right? But the shame may have come from something more deeper, and like, a lot of internal messaging and external messaging we received when we were children about something, about our worthiness. So embarrassment is usually related to a circumstance, and shame is activation of a core belief that there is something wrong with us, that we're unworthy, and that fear as well that we will not meet social expectations. Therefore, we could be rejected, ostracized from our pack, whether our pack be our friend group, our peer group, our work group, our family, our relationship with our spouse, whatever it is. We feel that this, whatever we've done, could be enough to make people realize that we do not belong in this pack, and they may push us out. And that's where the fear comes with shame. Fear and shame are very close together. They're like twins. They're always attached to each other. And the embarrassment, of course, is just a milder form of that. But the more we stuff embarrassment, the more we stuff these shameful experiences. And we're not actually, again, stuffing the experience. The experience just happened. It's done. It's over. It's the emotional energy around the experience that we couldn't handle. I can't deal with the fact that I did that. So we push that in and stuff it down on top of all that. So we have more and more layers of this shame being stuffed like bricks on top. And all the energy from the shame, that's just like any other emotion. All emotions are energy, right? It just wants to come in through us and go through us, be experienced, and then gone. Acknowledged, experienced, gone. But when we push it down, it can't be heard. It can't be felt. So it stays under there, whirling underneath this samskara, this blockage that we created. And every time something comes in that's a little bit embarrassing, and we do something, and that thing gets activated, this starts to come up. But it hits this, and we have a double whammy of emotion. And we have the shame spiral starting and swirling, and we get caught up in it, and it can last anywhere from minutes to hours to days to weeks to months to years, whenever we think about that experience. The experience has been gone, say, for 30 years. And when something happens that's embarrassing, it can activate the energy that we stored from that 30-year-old experience, and we could have a whole shame cycle starting. And it can take us away from everything but the shame, that obsessive thinking about what we've done and how we are at risk of being kicked out of the social groups we belonged into. And again, shame has to come a lot of time with that fear of not belonging. And it comes from internal messaging that we've stored in our subconscious that has become our core belief about who we are, that we are not worthy, that we are at the risk of being found out and shamed or pushed out. When other people shame us by calling us names and ridiculing us or criticizing us, or saying, I can't believe you did that, or talking about us or laughing at us when we do something, again, those are just external triggers, just events that happen. The energy around them may be really nothing personal, but we'll absorb it as a personal message because it will be proving to us that the messaging we already have in us about our unworthiness is true and validated. So again, we have that lifting up of old samskaras, this coming at us, and we may react in an extreme way with our shame. Now that's shame. Shame is different than guilt. Shame, I always think of, when you think about the core messaging that originates to shame, that I am not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm bad, I am an awful person, this based on this fear that I'm going to be found out and kicked out. Shame is a sense of being wrong. I am wrong as a human being. I'm wrong for being here. I shouldn't even be on this planet. If we unravel it more and more, we see this connecting thoughts and these connecting core beliefs leading to that belief of I'm worthy, I am unworthy, which leads to the shame cycle. We then had this awful time in life trying to redeem ourselves from this shame because, it's so hard to live with it. Oh, you're so bad. So we tried to come up and do things that please other people, but hide our shame, hide our so-called reasons for not being enough. And we tried to overcompensate or please or whatever. If we don't go down the road of the self-fulfilling prophecy and just give up and say, this is who I am, and hate ourselves as much as we assume everybody else is hating us for who we are. But either way, we're either redeeming or living a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to shame. So we are definitely not in a healthy place. But we are building a persona, a psyche around the shame. And that's why I think it was John Bradshaw said we are shame-based when we do that. Our personalities become shame-based. Everything we do is based around hiding that shame because shame likes to live in the dark. Okay? It's like a mildew or a mole that grows inside us, making us sick, but it likes the dark. It doesn't like to be exposed to light. It's not something we talk about. We can talk about, so many things that are wrong about us, but we very seldom talk about the experience of shame and what shame does and how bad we are and how wrong we are and how worthy we are. So it's something we really, really stuff down, probably more so than any other human reaction we may have, or human emotion or experience we may have. We hide shame. So it's hiding in the dark, so we don't want the light shine down it. We don't want these triggers that make it come up and creep up and make itself known, and that's the red face and the cringing over. So shame is about being, it's about feeling wrong, being wrong, okay? Now, embarrassment is a mild form of that. So the more shame-based you are, the more likely you're going to get embarrassed in social situations when you don't meet social expectations. And again, it's not so much what the other person is thinking, even if they are outwardly ridiculing us. We project it inward and say they're just validating, and that's why this comes up, and that's why the experience is so bad when other people notice what we've done that wasn't meeting social expectations. The other thing that I want to talk about is guilt. Now, guilt and shame are two different things. I said shame is being wrong. Guilt is doing wrong. So we'll have an emotions very similar to shame when we feel like we've done something wrong. And some people will say guilt is a healthy form of shame, and shame and embarrassment tend to be the unhealthy form. But I believe both are necessary for our humanness to progress while we're alive. I think both are unhealthy emotions, basically. Guilt is over what we've done. Shame is over who we are. So when I have guilt for doing something, so say if in that moment that this individual who was under the influence, said something very hurtful to another person, then that guilt, you would say, is, appropriate. It's appropriate to have guilt. And, we'd say that, right? And if you go to court of law, at that time they broke a law, did something that was like busted a window in a store shop or something like that, when they're under the influence and they got caught and they were arrested and they were brought to court, the judge is going to want to see that guilt on you. They want to know that you are remorseful for what you've done. And the more remorseful and guilty you feel, the less likely, your sentencing or whatever, your charges are going to probably be less. But if you're showing no remorse, and if you're saying, I'm not guilty, and you refuse to take accountability for your actions, then that's something totally different, right? Guilt is better than not taking accountability when we do things wrong and not owning what we've done and lying about what we've done. For sure, guilt is better. But still, guilt and shame belong under those fear umbrellas of the lower energy emotions that can keep us down and keep us small and keep us focused, because they have a tendency to draw us right in, right? Consciousness-wise. They draw the consciousness right in. The consciousness gets right absorbed into the shame, and this twirling, spinning, spiraling that the shame cycle does. And guilt as well. We get into that because guilt can feed the shame cycle. Guilt can reinforce the idea we have of ourselves as being unworthy and unlovable, and it can increase the fear that we will be ostracized. But neither guilt and shame are necessary human emotions for us to grow. I honestly don't believe they are. I think they're a waste of time. Shame-based people tend to feel guilty about everything, and I know I was like that my entire life. Guilty about everything. If I said the wrong thing, if I forgot to put my blinker on, if I made a mistake in school, instead of just saying, oh my gosh, that's a little embarrassment, it turned into full-fledged guilt, which activate the shame cycle. Next thing I know is in full-fledged shame, because they can go hand in hand as well. Guilt is only necessary if we see not the negative emotion of guilt, but the intellectual process of remorse and understanding and taking accountability for what we did. That's, I feel, is productive and valuable for our growth. But if we get absorbed in guilt, we end up judging ourselves. And this is what I'm trying to get to, is judging, how damaging judging can be. The shame-based person judges themselves as being awful, not worthy of taking up the space on this earth, right? A guilty person judges the behavior they did, and therefore, because of the behavior, they say, I am, they put those two big, beautiful words in front of it, guilty. I am guilty. But I am doesn't belong under those, in front of those low energy emotions. I am is so grand to belong there. It belongs into all the emotions above acceptance that take us, skyrocket us up to bliss. But we have a tendency to use that I am and say, I am guilty. You are not guilty. You did something that was embarrassing. You did something maybe that hurt another person intentionally, something that they perceived as hurtful. Because all you've done when you hurt another person basically is triggered them or offered them a trigger to activate their own samskaras, their own guilt cycles, their own shame cycles, their own fear cycles, and cause that disturbance inside them. It wasn't you that caused it. It was what you've done was a trigger, and what was already inside them got activated, and that's what hurt them, and that's what upset them. And if we do it to the body, of course, that's another thing, we're hurting the body. Not that we have a right to hurt anybody, say what we want to say and do what we want to do, and definitely not. And that's where social sanctions come in. Society, if we are stuck of ourselves, think about ourselves in this pack and we're needing to belong, well, if we all have egos, and we have to recognize that everybody has an ego or a psyche or a personality, that is prone to shame, that is prone to guilt, prone to projection, prone to judgment, then we got to be careful because the society would be chaotic. We need social sanctions. We need to come up with laws and morals and ways to behave in this society. And these are very, very relative to the society we're in, right? So the conditions to belonging into the society, for example, would be considered a social sanction. And those conditions may be totally different in another society because it's relative. So morality is relative. So what's right, so-called right in this society may not be right in another society. So whatever this person did when they were intoxicated and they felt that it was, something that was publicly shameful, therefore morally wrong to some degree, then that was based on the judgment of the other members in that society. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were bad. And that's what we tend to do, don't we? We try to label people when they do things that are not befitting our social expectations. They're bad, they're wrong, they shouldn't be. They should be ostracized and out of the group. They should be punished severely. And I can think of things that are actually criminal and still say, every individual within them, no matter what they've done, has this being inside them that is not the one that's doing the behavior. It's the psyche and the personality. Yes, we own it as a body and a mind. We own whatever we do. If we've done something that was criminal, we pay the price, right? But that's up for the judge to decide. It's not up for all members of society to judge, because everybody comes from their own samskaras. Everybody comes from their own conditioning. Everybody comes from their own relative morality. And they may be judging us differently than the next person would. That's why the judge comes in a court system, because they're the ones that decide the non-biased way. You know, sanctions are already written down, put in place, and those are the rights that we go by. And if you're not, what you've done was the wrong, then you will get the penalty. But as this is going on, it is not our place to judge as human beings in the social group. It is not up to us to judge what's right or wrong in another. We already judge ourselves too much. This person who's talking about what they've done, I can tell, is judging themselves very harshly, to the point where they say, how can I live with what I've done? You just did something. You are not that which you did. And I don't care how bad it was. You were not that which you did. Yes, you did it. Therefore, you are accountable for it. Therefore, you will have to reap the consequences of social sanctions for it. But do not beat yourself up. And if someone outside you who's not a judge in a court of law is judging you for what you've done, then you'll have to find a way to back away and say, your judgment is yours. It's not helpful to this group. I have to look after what I'm experiencing. And experience the shame and embarrassment and guilt. Recognize it. Instead of stuffing it down, recognize it. Look deeply into it. Sure, look into where it comes from if you want to. Go to the roots of it. But just know that all you have to do is experience it. And it, like every emotion in this world, will pass in and pass out. It will not touch you too deeply unless you cling to it and pull it in and try to stuff it down on top of all those samskara layers you have. Let it go. Let it go. And let go of judgment. And yes, people will judge because people are egos, and egos judge. But people are not their egos, so don't judge the judger. Just recognize that this, what they're doing, they know not what they do, basically. They're not evolved enough yet, so they're overrun by their ego and their judgments. But you do not have to be overrun by ego and judgment. Once you recognize that you are not the ego, you are not the personality that did this thing, you are in the body that did this thing, so yes, you have to take accountability for it. You just let your ego take over at that night that you got drunk or whatever it is you did. You let your ego take over. Now it's time to give the reins back to the higher self, that consciousness, that awareness that is in here watching you as a human, they call me, experience all this. And give the reins back to that consciousness. So that consciousness can look about from a distance and see all these happenings that are inducing embarrassing moments and shameful moments and guilt and judgment and social sanctioning, and recognize that it's all just an act. It's just all a play playing in front of you. You don't have to get so caught up and swept away in those shame cycles. You don't got to get swallowed up by them. Shame and guilt are just ego emotions that you can get beyond by simply recognizing you are not them. They're just something this human you call me is experiencing. Just let it experience it. Just let it be. Let it go. And learn that what judgment does. Learn that, oh my God, if I'm feeling this bad, everybody around me must be feeling this bad at times too. I don't have to judge them. They're judging themselves hard enough. And then slowly losing that tendency towards judgment that comes with shame and guilt. And comes with our social sanctioning and our so-called collective morality. Morality is relative. It can change from one situation to another. You don't know everybody's story. You don't know why they did what they did. You don't know where they came from. So your judging them is just as damaging as you judging yourselves. And it's not that you're judging them is damaging to them, it's damaging to you because you're getting lost up and caught up and swept away by judgment again, which takes you away from your higher self. And you all want to be back evaluating this human you call me, we call me, do what it does, feeling shame and embarrassment. We don't want to get swept away in that. We don't want to get swept away by the shame cycle, nor do we want to get swept away by the judgment tendency. We just want to recognize it's just this human thing humans do. It's part of the psyche and the personality. It's not who we are. It's not who they are. And society, I think, would be a much better place if we could learn to do that. Boys, did I ever ramble? 25 minutes. Anyway, if you listen this long, good for you. If you didn't, I perfectly understand. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you have a day that is, I'm not going to say free from shame, where you can handle the shame, you can handle the guilt and see that it's not who you are, and you can let it go, that you can handle the morality around you without getting caught up in the need to judge it in other people or yourself, and that you can just be glorious, good person that you have always been. Thank you so much for joining me.